Miss, this way. Take my hand. Hold tight.
She was running barefoot from her father's farm until a cowboy caught up and swept her off her feet. Texas, 1875. The sound of hoofbeats echoed in the distance as Abigail Abby Maeve's bare feet pounded against the hard-packed earth, her breath ragged and desperate. At 19, she had finally found the courage to escape the desolate life forced upon her. But freedom came with a price she wasn't prepared to pay. Blood from her cut feet mingled with the dusty soil of the Texas prairie as she ran blindly through the tall grass, the hem of her tattered dress catching on sharp brambles. The unforgiving landscape of the Texas frontier offered little mercy to a young woman alone. Abby's dark hair streamed behind her like a banner as she glanced over her shoulder, seeing the silhouettes of the lawless men on horseback in the distance. They were gaining on her with every passing second. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed herself harder, knowing what awaited her if they caught her a fate worse than death. She was nothing to them, just a witness, a loose end to be tied up. There she is. One of them boomed across the open prairie. Get her. Abby choked back a sob as she crested a small hill, her vision blurring from exhaustion and tears. She had been running for nearly an hour, having slipped away during the pre-dawn hours while the household slept. But they had discovered her absence sooner than she'd hoped, and her head start was rapidly diminishing. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, approaching from a different direction than her pursuers. Abby's panic intensified. Was this another of her father's friends, ready to drag her back to that hellish existence? She changed course, veering toward a stand of cottonwood trees, her only possible shelter. "Miss, this way," a deep voice called out. A tall cowboy on a magnificent chestnut stallion galloped toward her, his face partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He extended his arm as he maneuvered his horse alongside her. "Take my hand," he urged, his blue eyes intense beneath the brim of his hat. Abby hesitated for only a second before the sound of her father's approaching horses made the decision for her. She reached up and felt the cowboy's strong grip close around her wrist. With a swift, powerful movement, he lifted her off the ground and swung her up onto the saddle in front of him. "Hold tight," he commanded, wrapping one arm around her waist as he turned his horse and spurted into a gallop. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away. And if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. It all started the day they came. The day a world I thought I knew was torn to shreds. A world of dust and sun-scorched earth where my grandmother's wisdom was my only guide. My grandmother, she was the last of her tribe. A well of stories and knowledge that flowed through her veins like the very lifeblood of the land. She taught me to read the wind, to speak the language of the rustling leaves, and to find solace in the silence of the desert. But that was before the lawless men came, before their greed spilled blood on our land. It was a day like any other, the sun rising over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. But the peace was shattered by the sound of gunfire, a brutal symphony that echoed in the distance. They were here, the men my grandmother had warned me about, the men who saw the land not as a living, breathing entity, but as a prize to be conquered, a piece of property to be owned. And I was nothing more than a witness to their cruelty, a ghost to be erased. I remember my grandmother's face, etched with lines of a life lived in harmony with the earth. She looked at me, her eyes, dark and deep as a bottomless well, filled with a love that transcended words. "Run, child," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Run and do not look back. The land will guide you, and the spirits will protect you." Her words were the last I ever heard from her, the last piece of a world I knew, gone in a puff of smoke. And I ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until my feet bled, until the world around me was nothing but a blur of pain and despair. I ran from the fire that consumed my home, from the men who stole everything I ever held dear. I ran from a past that haunted me and a future that offered no solace. I was a leaf in the wind, a lonely soul adrift in a sea of sorrow, lost and hopeless. And then he appeared, a silhouette against the setting sun, a figure of strength and salvation. His voice, deep and resonant, cut through the noise of my panic. "Miss, this way." His hand, strong and sure, reached out to me. It was a lifeline, a beacon in the darkness. I hesitated for a moment, my mind a storm of doubt and fear. Was this another trap? Another cruel joke played by a merciless fate? But then I heard them, the men who sought to destroy me, their hooves thundering behind me like the drums of war. My choice was made. I reached out and took his hand, his grip closing around my wrist like a promise of protection. With a swift, powerful movement, he lifted me off the ground and swung me onto his horse, his body a solid wall of warmth against my back. "Hold tight," he commanded, his voice a steadying force in the chaos. The sensation of flying across the prairie, the powerful animal beneath us, and the stranger's steady arm around my waist overwhelmed my senses. The wind whipped my hair around my face as we raced away from my pursuers. "They're following," I cried, looking back to see my past giving chase, a specter of pain and loss. "Don't worry," the cowboy assured me, his breath warm against my ear. "This Mustang is the fastest in these parts." He guided the horse into a ravine, its winding path a maze designed to confuse our pursuers. I held on tight, my heart pounding a desperate rhythm against my ribs, a prayer whispered on the wind. I didn't know who this man was, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere to save me, but in that moment, he was everything. He was my hope, my salvation, my only chance at a future I could not yet see. He led the horse through the winding paths of the ravine, the setting sun casting long shadows behind us. The air grew cooler, and the scent of wild sage and dust filled my nostrils. I clung to him, his solid presence, a comfort I hadn't known in years. My body was racked with shivers, not from the cold, but from the raw fear that still lingered in my bones. He was quiet, his focus unwavering as he navigated the treacherous terrain. I risked a glance at him, his profile silhouetted against the fading light. He was a stranger, yet he held my life in his hands, and I had no choice but to trust him. After what felt like an eternity, he slowed the horse to a walk, and we emerged from the ravine. The world was still and silent. The only sound the gentle thud of the Mustang's hooves and the ragged beat of my own heart. "They're gone," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We've lost them." I looked back, and indeed, the menacing silhouettes were no longer in sight. A wave of relief, so profound it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. He dismounted, his movements fluid and graceful, and then reached up to help me down. My legs, weak from the ordeal, almost gave way, but he caught me, his arms a strong embrace that held me steady. "Easy there," he said, his eyes, dark as a rich loam, filled with a gentle concern. "You're safe now." He led me to a small cave hidden behind a curtain of tangled vines, a secret sanctuary known only to him. "This is my hideout," he explained, "a place where I can rest and be with my thoughts. We'll be safe here for the night." He carefully tended to my wounded feet, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he washed away the blood and dirt, the touch sending a jolt of warmth through my body. The interior of the cave was sparse but clean, with a small fire pit in the center and a bedroll in the corner. He set me down gently on the bedroll, the softness of the blanket, a luxury I hadn't felt in a long, long time. "Stay put," he instructed. "I need to tend to my horse, then I'll get us something to eat." Left alone, I took stock of my situation. I had escaped, but what now? My home was gone, my grandmother, gone. I had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes on my back, and nowhere to go. And I had placed my trust in a complete stranger, a handsome stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. When he returned, he carried a small bundle of supplies and set about building a fire. "Let's get you warmed up," he said, his voice a low murmur, "and then we can talk." As he prepared a simple meal of dried jerky and hardtack, I studied him. He was a man of the land, his skin tanned and weathered by the sun, his hands calloused from years of hard labor. His eyes were the only thing that gave him away, a deep, thoughtful brown that held a wisdom far beyond his years. "How did you happen to be there just when I needed help?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me finally finding voice. He looked at me, his gaze searching my face, a flicker of a sad smile playing on his lips. "I was checking fence lines for the railroad when I heard shouting and gunfire," he began. "Thought someone might be in trouble, so I rode toward the commotion. I'm Jebediah Stone. And you, miss, if you don't mind me asking, why were you running barefoot across open country?" I looked down at my hands, twisted together in my lap. They killed her," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The men you saw chasing me. They came for the railroad money, and she was in the way." I took a deep breath, the memories a sharp, painful ache in my chest. My grandmother, she was the last of her tribe, the last to know the old ways. She taught me everything, to live off the land, to survive. But they took that from me. Jeb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice gentle. "No one deserves to be treated that way, miss. You were right to run." He passed me a piece of jerky, his touch as light as a whisper. "We'll figure it out. We'll get you a new life, a safe one." His words were a balm to my soul, a promise of a future I had dared not dream of. We ate in silence, the firelight dancing on his face, illuminating his kind eyes. I told him more about my grandmother, about the stories she told me of her people, of the land, of the spirits that watched over us. He listened, his silence a deep well of understanding. He, in turn, told me about himself, about the railroad, about the brutal realities of the frontier. He had been a soldier once, a gun for hire, but he had grown tired of the bloodshed, of the endless cycle of violence. He wanted a different life, a life of peace, a life where he could protect what he held dear. He was a warrior, a man of violence, but he was also a man of honor, a man who sought to do good in a world that had forgotten what it meant to be kind. That night, he insisted I take the bedroll while he slept on the hard ground near the cave's entrance, his rifle within easy reach. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me as I thought about the strange turn my life had taken. I had lost everything, but I had gained a new hope, a new chance, and I had found a strange kind of comfort in the presence of this man, this stranger who had risked his life for mine. He was a mystery, a puzzle I longed to solve, a beacon in the darkness. As dawn broke, I awoke to the smell of coffee. Jeb had already been up for some time, tending to his horse and preparing for our departure. "Your pursuers might still be searching for you," he said as he helped me to my feet. The wounds on my feet had stiffened overnight, making walking painful. "We should get moving as soon as possible." He fashioned makeshift shoes for me from some spare leather and rags he found in the cave, then lifted me onto the Mustang's back once more. The journey to the main camp took most of the morning. As we crested a hill, I gasped at the sight below us. A bustling outpost of the railroad company sprawled across the valley, with a large office building, several supply sheds, and a line of tents for the workers. "It's home," Jeb replied with evident pride. "Been working here since I was a boy." As we approached the main building, a tall man with a stern face stepped onto the porch, his eyes narrowing as he saw me. "Jebediah, where have you been?" he called. "We've been worried sick." "Got sidetracked, Patrick," Jeb replied, dismounting and helping me down. "This is Abigail Maeve. She's in a bit of trouble and needs a safe place to stay for a while." Patrick's sharp eyes took in my disheveled appearance, the makeshift bandages on my feet, and the fear that still lingered in my eyes. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and took my hand. "Come inside, child. Let's get you cleaned up and properly fed." I glanced back at Jeb, suddenly reluctant to leave the one person who had shown me kindness in recent memory. "Go on," he encouraged with a gentle smile. "Patrick will take good care of you. I need to report to the foreman, but I'll check on you later." The next few hours passed in a blur as Patrick fussed over me, providing me with a hot bath, clean clothes that belonged to his wife, and a hearty meal that made me realize just how hungry I had been. After hearing my story, Patrick's expression hardened. "Those men, they're part of a larger scheme. They're trying to stop the railroad, to get us to pay them off. We'll get them, girl. You'll be safe here at the camp." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a feeling of security I hadn't known in years. That evening, as I sat on the porch, Watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Jeb joined me, having finished his day's work. "Patrick says you're staying on," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "I'm glad to hear it." "I can't thank you enough for what you did yesterday," I said, turning to face him. "You saved my life, Jebediah Stone." He smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," I shook my head. "Not anyone. Most would have ridden past or worse, taken me back to them for a reward." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the camp settling down for the night surrounding us. "Will they come looking for me here?" I finally asked, voicing the fear that had been lurking in my mind. "The railroad camp is one of the safest places in the territory," Jeb replied. "We have men on patrol day and night. Even if they discovered where you are, they'd think twice before causing trouble here." His words provided some comfort, but I knew the men who had chased me were relentless. If they were determined to find me, they wouldn't give up easily. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. The next morning, Patrick showed me around the camp and outlined my duties as a helper in the mess hall. The work was far less demanding than what I had been accustomed to on the farm, and the railroad men treated their workers with respect and fairness. Over the following days, I settled into life at the camp, gradually relaxing as I realized I was truly safe. The cuts on my feet healed, and with proper food and rest, the haunted look in my eyes began to fade. I saw Jeb frequently, as he often had business at the main office, and sometimes joined the other workers for meals at Patrick's insistence. I found myself watching for him, my heart beating a little faster whenever he appeared. 2 weeks after my arrival, I was hanging laundry in the yard when I heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, I froze in terror as I recognized the 3 riders coming up the long drive to the camp, the men who had chased me. Dropping the wet sheet I had been about to hang, I fled to the mess hall, bursting into the kitchen where Patrick was preparing lunch. "They're here," I gasped, my face pale with fear. "The men, they've found me." Patrick's expression hardened as he wiped his hands on his apron. "Stay inside, Abby. I'll handle this." But I couldn't remain hidden. My fear gave way to a newfound determination. I had escaped once. I would not allow myself to be dragged back now. Following Patrick onto the porch, I stood slightly behind the older man as the riders approached. The leader of the men dismounted, his weathered face twisted into a scowl as he spotted me. "There you are, girl," he growled. "You've caused enough trouble. Get your things and come home where you belong." "She's not going anywhere with you, mister," Patrick stated firmly, his stance unyielding. The man's face darkened with anger. "This is private business, madam. Step aside." "Abby is under our protection now," Patrick continued, unfazed by his intimidation. "Perhaps you'd like to discuss the matter with the lawmen when they arrive." The other men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles, clearly not having expected resistance. "You have no right to keep her," the leader insisted, taking a step forward. "She's our property, and the law is on our side. The law doesn't look kindly on men who terrorize innocent women and kill those who get in their way," came a steady voice from behind the men. Jeb approached on foot, having heard the commotion from the nearby corral where he'd been working. Several other railroad hands had also noticed the confrontation and were making their way toward the office, their expressions grim. The leader turned to face Jeb, his eyes narrowing in recognition. "You're the one who took her," he accused. "Stole her right out from under us." "I helped a young woman who was running for her life," Jeb corrected, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "And I'll do it again if necessary." The tension in the air was palpable as the leader assessed the situation. He was outnumbered, and the determined expressions on the faces of the railroad hands made it clear they wouldn't hesitate to defend me. "This isn't over," the man spat, turning back to me. "You think you found yourself a better life here, playing house with these fancy railroad men. You're nothing but a useless burden, girl, always have been." His words were designed to wound, and I felt their sting. But something had changed within me during my time at the camp. I stepped forward, moving out from behind Patrick's protective presence. "I'm not going back with you," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Not now, not ever. The life you offered me was no life at all, just endless fear and pain. I found something better here, something I never knew existed. Kindness, respect." The leader's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful." "I think you've said enough," Jeb interrupted, stepping between us. "Miss Maeve has made her choice clear. I suggest you respect it and be on your way." For a moment, it seemed the leader might explode with fury, but a glance at the growing number of men surrounding them made him reconsider. With a final venomous look at me, he remounted his horse. "You're dead to me, girl," he declared. "Don't come crawling back when these people tire of you." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men following reluctantly behind. The confrontation left me shaking, but also filled with a strange sense of liberation. I had faced my tormentors and stood my ground. The chains of fear that had bound me to my past were finally breaking. That evening, Jeb found me sitting alone by the small creek behind the camp, skipping stones across the still water. "You were brave today," he said, settling beside me on the grass. I smiled faintly. It didn't feel like bravery, more like desperation. "Sometimes they're the same thing," Jeb observed, selecting a flat stone and sending it skipping across the water's surface. "Standing up for yourself when everything in you wants to run. That's courage, Abby." I studied his profile in the fading light, the strong jaw and kind eyes that had begun to feature in my dreams. "Why did you really help me that day, Jeb? The truth, please." He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. "I told you about my sister," he finally said. "What I didn't tell you was that she was a witness to a crime, and the outlaws killed her to silence her. I wasn't there to save her." His voice caught slightly. "When I saw you running across that field barefoot and desperate, it was like seeing her ghost. I couldn't ride past. I couldn't fail another young woman the way the world failed my sister." Impulsively, I reached out and covered his hand with my own. "I'm sorry about your sister, Jeb," I said, "and I'm grateful that you were there for me." Our eyes met, and something shifted between us, a recognition of shared pain, but also of possibility. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flutter of hope for my future. As the weeks progressed, I thrived at the railroad camp. Patrick's wife, a kind woman with a heart as big as the Texas sky, taught me to cook and manage a household, skills my grandmother had begun to impart before her untimely death. I made friends among the other workers and began to feel truly at home. My friendship with Jeb deepened as well. He taught me to ride properly, laughing at my initial trepidation around the gentle mare he selected for my lessons. "She won't bite," he teased as I approached the horse cautiously. "Easy for you to say," I retorted. "You were probably born in the saddle." Despite my fears, I proved to be a natural rider once I overcame my initial nervousness. Soon we were taking regular rides together during Jeb's free time, exploring the vast acreage of the railroad land. During one such ride in late August, we stopped to rest by a stream, allowing our horses to drink while we sat in the shade of a large oak tree. "Patrick's wife says I've picked up housekeeping faster than any girl she's ever seen," I said proudly. "She's even teaching me to manage the accounts." Jeb smiled, pleased by my enthusiasm. "You've come a long way from that scared girl running across the prairie." "I have you to thank for that," I replied softly. "If you hadn't come along when you did." "But I did," Jeb interrupted gently. "And look at you now. Strong, independent, beautiful." The last word hung in the air between us, charged with meaning. I felt my cheeks grow warm under his gaze. "Jeb, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "You've been through so much and you're just finding your footing. I don't want to rush you or make you feel pressured in any way." I reached out and touched his cheek, the gesture silencing his words. "What if I don't want to wait?" I asked softly. "What if I already know what I feel?" The look in Jeb's eyes stole my breath, hope, desire, and something deeper that made my heart race. Slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine in a gentle kiss. It was my first kiss, and it awakened sensations I had never imagined, warmth spreading through my body, a fluttering in my stomach, and a yearning for more. When we finally parted, Both of us were breathing faster. "I've wanted to do that since the day I found you," Jeb admitted, his voice husky. "Even when I was covered in dirt and blood, running for my life?" "Even then," he confirmed, tucking a strand of dark hair behind my ear. "There was something about you, Abigail Maeve, a spirit that couldn't be broken no matter what life threw at you." Our courtship progressed slowly but steadily after that day. Jeb was respectful of my past traumas, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. We found moments to be alone together, walks after dinner, early morning rides before work began, and Sunday afternoons when the camp operated at a slower pace. "Hey, friend, go grab a full glass of water. People often forget to drink enough, and that's actually a pretty serious issue for you." Our days fell into a comfortable rhythm, a dance of quiet moments and shared smiles that spoke more than words ever could. We were two broken souls finding solace in each other's company, a puzzle whose pieces fit together in a way that made perfect sense. I was learning to trust again, to open my heart to the possibility of a love that was not born of convenience or fear, but of genuine care and respect. Jeb was the kind of man who would hold a door open for a lady, but also the kind of man who would stand his ground against a band of outlaws. He was a perfect blend of strength and tenderness, a quality that I had never known in a man before. I found myself falling more and more in love with him, a deep, consuming love that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Patrick, the camp foreman, observed our growing attachment with approval. He had come to respect my work ethic and resilience, and he had always valued Jeb as one of his most reliable hands. "That girl's brought a light back to young Jeb's eyes," he commented to his wife one evening as they watched us walking in the garden. "Haven't seen him smile so much since before the war." Patrick's wife nodded in agreement. They're good for each other. Both had their share of hardship, but together they seemed to find joy. In October, as the leaves began to turn and a crispness settled into the air, Jeb approached Patrick with a proposition. "I'd like to build a house, sir," he stated without preamble. "On that piece of land near the eastern border that you mentioned might be available for senior hands." Patrick studied the young man thoughtfully. "I reckon this has something to do with Miss Maeve." Jeb nodded, a hint of color touching his tan cheeks. "I mean to ask her to marry me, sir, but I want to have something to offer her first, a home of her own." The foreman clapped Jeb on the shoulder. "The land is yours, Stone. You've earned it. And for what it's worth, I think Miss Maeve would say yes, even if you were proposing a life in a tent." With Patrick's blessing, Jeb began working on the small house during his free time, often joined by other hands who volunteered their help. I noticed his frequent absences and the secretive looks exchanged between the men. But whenever I questioned Jeb, he would simply smile and change the subject. As Thanksgiving approached, Jeb's project was finally complete. A modest but solidly built two-bedroom house with a stone fireplace and a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. The location was perfect, set on a gentle rise overlooking the vast prairie with cottonwood trees, providing shade in summer and shelter from winter wind. On a crisp November afternoon, Jeb asked me to accompany him on a ride, claiming he needed to check on some new fence lines reported near the eastern boundary of the camp. I agreed readily, always happy for a chance to spend time with him away from the busy camp. As we rode, I noticed we were heading toward a part of the land I hadn't visited before. When we crested a small hill, I gasped at the sight of the neat cabin below, smoke curling from its chimney into the clear blue sky. "Jeb, whose place is that?" I asked, confused. I didn't know anyone lived out this way. He reined his horse to a stop, watching my face carefully. "No one does. Not yet, anyway." Confusion clouded my features as Jeb dismounted and helped me down from my mare. Taking my hand, he led me down the slope toward the cabin. "I don't understand," I said as we approached the house. "Why are we here?" Jeb stopped at the gate in the small picket fence that surrounded the yard. "This is what I've been working on these past few months," he explained. "This land is mine. Patrick granted it to me for my years of service, and this house I built it with some help from the other hands." My eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You built a house? But why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was meant to be a surprise," Jeb replied, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "For you, He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, simple silver band. Abigail Maeve, when I found you running across that field 6 months ago, I had no idea you would change my life. You've brought light and laughter back into my world, and I can't imagine a future without you in it. He took a deep breath. Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home with me? Tears filled my eyes as I looked from the ring to the man holding it, this cowboy who had rescued me in more ways than one. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, Jebediah Stone, I will marry you. His face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto my finger, then gathered me into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and protection. Come see our home, he said when we finally parted, leading me through the gate and up the path to the front door. The interior was simply furnished with pieces Jeb had either made himself or purchased from craftsmen in the nearby town. A quilt that Patrick's wife had contributed brightened the bedroom, and the kitchen was equipped with basic necessities. It's not much, Jeb said, suddenly uncertain as he watched me explore the rooms. Not compared to the main office at the camp. It's perfect, I interrupted, turning to him with shining eyes. It's the most beautiful home I've ever seen because it was built with love. We were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the camp with Patrick and his wife, standing as witnesses and the other hands and their families in attendance. Patrick's wife had helped me sew a wedding dress of ivory muslin, elegant in its simplicity, and had loaned me a lace veil that her own daughter had worn. Jeb, dressed in his best clothes with his boots polished to a high shine, watched in awe as his bride walked toward him, her face glowing with happiness. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister declared after we had exchanged our vows. You may kiss your bride. Our kiss was a promise of protection, of partnership, of a love that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. The celebration that followed was joyous with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire camp. As evening fell, Jeb and I slipped away from the festivities, riding to our new home in the gathering dusk. Hey, friend, go grab a full glass of water. People often forget to drink enough, and that's actually a pretty serious issue for you. The winter of 1875 to 1876 was harsh with frequent snowstorms and temperatures that dropped well below freezing. But inside our snug cabin, Jeb and I created a warm haven, our love for each other growing stronger with each passing day. Jeb continued his work at the railroad, rising before dawn to ride to the main camp and often returning after dark. I kept busy maintaining our home and helping Patrick's wife with special projects at the main office. My skills as a cook and housekeeper improving under the older woman's tutelage. In February, during a rare, mild spell, we received unexpected visitors. 2 riders approached our cabin late one afternoon as I was preparing dinner. Jeb, who had returned early from his duties, stepped onto the porch, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. As the riders drew closer, I joined my husband on the porch and gasped in recognition. "It's my brothers," I said, my voice tight with apprehension. The brothers dismounted at a respectful distance, their expressions uncertain. They were younger than I remembered. "What do you want?" Jeb called, keeping me slightly behind him. The elder brother removed his hat, twisting it nervously in his hands. "We came to see Abby," he replied, "to make sure she's all right." I stepped forward, my initial fear giving way to curiosity. My brothers had never been cruel to me the way my father had been, but they had never protected me either, following my father's lead out of fear or indifference. "I'm fine," I said coolly. "Better than fine, actually. Why are you really here?" The brothers exchanged glances before the younger one spoke. "Our father, he died last month. Pneumonia took him quick." The news hit me with unexpected force. Despite everything he had done, my father was still my father, and his death marked the end of a chapter in my life. I felt Jeb's hand on my shoulder, offering silent support. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said finally, uncertain what else to say. "There's more," the elder brother continued. "The farm is ours now. We've been trying to make a go of it, but—" He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "What my brother is trying to say," the younger one picked up, "is that we're making a mess of things. Neither of us knows the first thing about running a household. The place is falling apart without you, Abby." I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication that my contributions had been more valuable than my father had ever acknowledged, sorrow for the brothers who were clearly struggling, and a fierce gratitude for the new life I had built with Jeb. "I can't come back," I said firmly. "This is my home now, with my husband. We're not asking you to come back for good," the elder brother clarified hastily. "Just maybe you could visit, help us get things organized, show us what to do." Jeb and I exchanged a look, an entire conversation passing between us without words. "You boys look like you could use a hot meal," Jeb finally said, his posture relaxing slightly. "Come inside and we can talk." Over dinner, the brothers shared news of the neighboring farms and the changes in the community since my departure. They were awkward but sincere in their attempts to reconnect with their sister, and by the time the meal was finished, the tension had eased considerably. "We thought Father was right about everything," the younger brother admitted as we sat around the fire after dinner. "But seeing you now, Abby, you're happy. Really happy. It makes us wonder what else he was wrong about." "People can change," I said softly. "Even after they are set in their ways, it's never too late to choose a different path." The brothers stayed the night, sleeping on pallets by the fire, and in the morning, a plan had been formed. I would ride with Jeb to the old farm the following week to help my brothers organize the household and teach them basic skills they would need to maintain the place. It would be a brief visit, with Jeb remaining at my side throughout. If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments. As they waved goodbye to the brothers, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Not forgiveness exactly, but a beginning of reconciliation with the parts of my past that could be salvaged. "Are you sure about this?" Jeb asked as we watched the riders disappear into the distance. I nodded, leaning against his solid strength. "They're young. They were as much under his thumb as I was, in their way. They deserve a chance to find their own path now that he's gone." The visit to the farm the following week was strange, but ultimately healing for me. The place that had been a prison now seemed smaller, less threatening. With Jeb's protective presence and my own newfound confidence, I was able to face the ghosts of my past and begin to lay them to rest. I showed my brothers how to organize the household, shared recipes my grandmother had taught me, and helped them develop a plan for managing the farm more efficiently. When we departed after 3 days, the relationship between my brothers and me had taken its first tentative steps toward repair. "Thank you," I said to Jeb as we rode home, the old farm receding behind us, for understanding why I needed to do that. He reached across the space between our horses to take my hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Abigail Stone, and the most forgiving." Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new beginnings. As the land awakened from winter's sleep, I discovered that new life was stirring within me as well. When the doctor confirmed my suspicions, I could barely contain my joy. As I waited for Jeb to return from work, I prepared his favorite meal and set the table with special care, placing a small pair of knitted booties beside his plate, a gift Patrick's wife had helped me make in secret. When Jeb arrived home, tired from a long day of work, he noticed the special preparations with curiosity. "What's the occasion?" he asked, washing up for dinner. "Sit down," I urged, my eyes sparkling with barely contained excitement. "I have something to tell you." As Jeb took his seat, his gaze fell on the tiny booties. For a moment, he stared at them uncomprehendingly. Then his eyes widened with realization. "Abby, are you?" I nodded, tears of happiness filling my eyes. "We're going to have a baby, Jeb, in the fall." The look of pure joy that transformed his face was something I knew I would remember for the rest of my life. He rose from his chair and swept me into his arms, holding me as if I were made of the most precious material on earth. "A baby," he whispered against my hair. "Our baby." That night, as we lay together in the quiet intimacy of our new marriage, Jeb's hand rested protectively over my still flat stomach, his touch gentle and reverent. "I promise you both," he said softly, "I will always keep you safe. You will never know the kind of fear or pain that marked our childhoods. Our baby will grow up surrounded by love and kindness. I covered his hand with my own,